Hi, it's been a while since I've put anything up on the channel, and there's been something that's been playing on my mind lately that I wanted to share with you and see if anyone else is having the same thoughts as me on this topic. So if you stop and consider where most of the oil and gas come from in the world, it's mostly coming from the Middle East, Arab states, and a fair bit out of Russia. And the thing that these places all have in common is that they're run by nasty, brutish dictators that really don't give a damn about their own citizens. They just are interested in lining their own pockets. And what's more, they have the rest of the world, like us, pretty much by the balls because we're so dependent on their oil and gas. If you take someone like Putin, for example, he uses all these petrodollars that he makes from selling oil and gas to Europe and to China, and then he goes and buys munitions which he then drops on Ukraine and kills and maims thousands and thousands of innocent people. And then if you consider America and the many wars that they've been engaged in over the last 100 years, fighting in the deserts of the Middle East, spilling blood and treasure in a place where they really don't have a dog in the fight. The only reason they're there is to protect their oil interests and to make sure that the oil's not cut off from supplying their economy. But just stop and imagine if you woke up tomorrow and suddenly there was an alternative fuel and we didn't need oil and gas anymore. And we could just turn around to people like Putin and say, thanks very much, we've appreciated all the oil that you've given us over the years, but we don't need it anymore. And the value of oil and gas would go to zero. Just imagine what that would do to those regimes. They'd no longer have the money to inflict the horrible misery that they inflict on others today. And many of those wars that are fought in the Middle East just wouldn't happen. Now, I know that sounds like a dream, but we're already well on the way to converting our economies to renewable energy and decarbonisation. And we could move a lot faster if we had the political will to do so. The problem is that we don't have leaders with the political courage to make the tough decisions. But that doesn't stop us as individuals from doing it. And I can tell you myself personally, I've done many things that where I've removed fossil fuels from my lifestyle. And indeed now, I haven't been to a petrol station for 2 years. And I haven't had an electricity bill for over 2 years as well, because I run everything off electricity and the electricity comes from the roof of my house. So it's not a dream, it's completely achievable. We just need to have the will to do it. Now I'm sure, I can imagine right now there's people shouting at the screen saying, oh yeah, but we don't just use oil for fuels, we also use it to manufacture plastics, which we make containers from that we use in so many places in our lives. But it's fair to say that this itself is causing us some trouble. There's a lot of plastic pollution in the oceans today, and scientists are now discovering that many of those plastics are breaking down into microplastics, which are getting into our food chain and then into our bodies. So this is a problem that we need to deal with. And if you stop and think about it, the reason that we've become so dependent on these plastics and that we have such a big plastics industry really goes back to when they began making fuels out of oil. And as a byproduct of the refining process, they finished up with a bunch of petrochemicals. And so some clever scientists, chemists, took those chemicals and worked out how to combine them and do clever stuff with them and make them into plastics which they could then form into the containers that we use. But if we hadn't have gone down that route of using oil as a fuel, we wouldn't have had access to those chemicals, and I'm sure we would have come up with alternatives. For example, we probably could have come up with many of those similar types of thermoplastics, starting with the cellulose that is part of trees and grass and all those natural things. Now, I don't pretend to know how that chemistry would work, but I'm pretty confident that there are some enough clever scientists in this world that they could figure it out. The only reason that hasn't happened is because, being a byproduct of the fuel industry, these petrochemicals are almost a waste product, which makes them very cheap, and therefore the plastics that are formed from them can be cheap as well. But I'm pretty sure we could come up with the alternatives if we really put our mind to it. As I said earlier, you just need the political will. So anyhow, that's my thoughts on the topic, and I'm really keen to hear yours because, as I said, I haven't heard anybody talking about this strategically. When they talk about renewables and the transformation and decarbonisation of the economy, they very rarely talk about the strategic aspect of that and how it could actually result in less wars and a much fairer world. And I think, when you're putting things in the balance, if you're perhaps considering the transition in your own environment, that in addition to the cost savings and the convenience of going away from fossil fuels, you might want to also put in that side of the balance the fact that you could be doing a lot of good, not just for the environment and the biosphere that we all live in, but also bringing about more peace in the world and a fairer world. So those are my thoughts. Keen to hear yours. You may have a totally different view on the subject, or you might have some other ideas on how we could speed up the transition. So please feel free to put those comments in the comment section down below, and I'll certainly read them. And I thank you for taking the time to watch this video to the end if you've got this far. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, take care.